in order to move beyond a little microbe that you cannot even see with the naked eye. So today we're going to delve into how we commune and communicate with the rest of nature. And before we do, we want to take a pause, as we always do as we commence our Humanity Rising sessions, and just take a few deep breaths. Center yourself in your body. Close your eyes and place your attention on your heart. And for 1 minute, listen to your heartbeat in a spirit of gratitude and thanksgiving that you're alive. We're all alive at this most extraordinary moment in the human journey. Thank you, everyone. And now, with an open heart and a heart full of gratitude for each and every one of you who have joined Humanity Rising today, I want to begin our program by saying that for me personally, I can't think of anything more urgently necessary as a national security issue for the human race. No problem. Than moving into a realm of consciousness in which we can begin to commune and communicate with nature. Just imagine for a moment if we had the capacity to commune and communicate with the COVID-19 virus. We've been treating it as an enemy. We want to crush it, just like we want to get all the insects out of our house. We want to fertilize around the plants so that we destroy organic life. Just think of the war on nature that human beings have conducted for millennia. And what if we turn that on its head and we were able to communicate with what COVID-19 is trying to tell us? Just think that thought for a moment. Hold that thought for the next hour or so, while we talk with someone, Pea Horsley, out of the UK, that has spent her life learning how to talk with animals, learning how to talk with dogs and cats and dolphins and whales and bears, has dedicated her life to teaching people how to do the same in the conviction, which is manifestly true, that all of us, because we're part of nature, can commune with nature, can communicate with nature. Most of us who have pets know from just personal experience that we communicate with our dogs and cats, with our birds. There's one woman we're hoping to get on Humanity Rising soon, Amy Morgana in New York, that has an African gray parrot that speaks over 1,500 words. He's the only species that I know of that actually speaks English in an intelligible way. I've met him. And I can't tell you what it's like to have a meaningful communication with another species, in this case, a parrot. Interspecies communication, if we would embrace it and teach it in our schools like we teach other languages, would radically transform human consciousness and be perhaps the one thing we could do that could change the world. So I'm delighted today to be able to have a conversation with Pea Horsley. And Pea, I want to welcome you to Humanity Rising. And I want to open our conversation together by asking you to just tell your story. Let's just begin by just tell your story. How did you wake up to the animal world? How did it all transpire for you? And then we can engage in our conversation. But welcome.
Thank you, Jim, and hello to everybody listening in and watching. I will most definitely answer your question, but first, before I do that, I felt so grounded and moved by your the music and giving time for us to be present here, that I feel quite moved to just invite the animals in to our session today.
Please.
So what I'd like to do is invite everybody to please just close your eyes and rest your hands in your lap. Take a breath. And think about the animals who you love. So your companion animals with you in physical body or in spirit. And all of the wild species of the land, of the air, of the ocean. All of the species who you love, who you admire, who you're curious about. And now visualize from your heart beaming the most beautiful, soft, gentle light out to all these beings. And that light can be any color that resonates with you in this moment. Beaming out the love from your heart to connect with all of the beautiful beings who you resonate with, whether in physical body or in spirit. And invite them in. Invite them to come closer and to join our circle where all beings are equal. Kindred spirits gathering here together to share to be present, to be understood as equals. And you may feel these animals coming and surrounding us, all the birds coming in, the little ones, the rodents coming in. You may feel the energy of whale or octopus or crab, all of the beings gathering with us for this circle of sharing. And in your own time, gently open your eyes. Thank you. So I think if we go back to the question, now that we have our friends close by, I think your question, Jim, was, how did I get into animal communication? Okay. Well, I haven't consciously been communicating with animals all of my life, but I've always had a curiosity about them. You know, I've always loved them, whatever species. And I actually worked in theatre as a stage manager for 15 years, very grounded, very organized, very logical in one way. And then I got to a point where I decided I wanted to get out of that profession and I wanted to return to my first love, which is animals. And I remember listing off all of these jobs that you can do with animals. And I was thinking, it's none of them. And my partner was going, well, what about this? I was like, no, that doesn't feel right. What about that? No. And I said, it's something else. You know, there's something else out there that I don't even know what it is, but it's something else to do with animals. And I don't know what that is yet. And then what happened is I adopted my first dog, Morgan, who is this guy here. And he arrived and he was really sad. And I thought, okay, that's something I'm doing wrong because I've had cats all my life. I know cats really well, but I don't know dogs. And then the animal home where I rescued him from, the Mayhew in North London here, sent out an invite to a workshop, which was animal communication, get to know your animals even better kind of thing. And I thought, oh, that's read your dog's body language. So I turned up thinking it was that, and very quickly realized that it wasn't. It was actually talk to the animal, you know, like real Dr. Dolittle stuff. And I was incredibly skeptical. I nearly walked out at lunchtime, but something made me stay, and thank goodness it did. And in the afternoon, we were asked to enter into a practice communication with a partner's animal from a photograph of them. And we were asked to ask this animal in the photograph questions. What's your favorite food? Who's your best friend? What's your favorite activity? And I thought, well, this is ridiculous. And, you know, everybody was knuckling down and they were like really serious and they were looking at this photograph. And I was thinking, what are they doing? You know, I was looking at this photograph of this woman's rabbit. In fact, it didn't know it was a rabbit until I turned it over. We were asked to like feel what the species is. And I thought, rabbit came into my head. I turned it over. It was an image of a rabbit. And I just dismissed it, which is a real, you know, beginner's thing that we do quite a lot. And then I was looking at this photograph and I said, you know, I'm meant to talk to you, but you're just a rabbit. You're not even a real rabbit. You're just a photograph of a rabbit. And you can't hear me, can you? And then in my mind, with my own inner voice, but with lots of attitude, I heard, who the hell do you think is listening to you? And I was like, what? You can hear me? And then I heard this voice again, lots of attitude. Yes, just get on with it. And what I didn't realize, Jim, is that this rabbit was really used to communicating with people. You know, he was a pro at communicating with people. It wasn't something new to him. I found that out later. And so I thought, okay, I've got nothing to lose. I didn't walk out. I might as well do this. So in my mind, I said, okay, what's your favorite food? I saw an image of green leaves and I was thinking, well, it's a rabbit, you know, that's going to be something like that. I asked, who's your best friend? Again, I saw this image, in, you know, with my mind's eye of a coffee-colored rabbit. I thought, okay, what's your favorite activity? And this time I saw an image of a sofa and I was like, okay, I'm making all of this up. And then we had to, you know, we had to feed back. And I was saying this to my partner about her rabbit. And she said, no, you're right. You know, that's not his favorite food. So I was like, okay, so this is not working. This, you know, we can't do this. And I said, and his favorite friend is this dark coffee colored rabbit. And she said, yeah, he's bonded with her and she's the only dark coffee colored rabbit I've got. And I've got about 12 rescued rabbits. I was like, oh, okay. And I said, what about the sofa as a favorite activity? And she said, okay, so he's a house rabbit and he loves watching TV and he watches the same program every week, same time. And it's You've Been Framed, you know, it's about human beings making fools of themselves. And he has a real tantrum if it's not on. He'll go and check another telly or he'll stamp his feet and go like, you know, put the telly on, you've forgotten it's the program. And I was like, what? So that was quite a lot for me to get my head around. And I remember coming home and saying to my partner, I think I've just been talking to a rabbit. But the thing that made me take notice was that, you know, this complete stranger had a photo of Texas, who's here. And from this photograph, she described my hallway, which is very distinctive, how to reach my living room, the color of my sofa, the name that I call it, plus his favorite thing to sit on in the garden and where it was positioned, the thing at that time. Amazing. Like Texas had welcomed her in, given her a tour of my house, told her where everything was and his favorite things. So I couldn't dismiss that, you know, there was evidence there that something was happening. And I went on a second workshop, and that second workshop, you know, I had my light bulb moment where I went, oh my God, this is the thing. This is the thing that I didn't know existed. I didn't have a name for. This is what I'm meant to be doing. And what I've realized over the years, and it's taken me time to come to that understanding, is that this is why I'm on the planet right now, you know, actually to share animal communication out with people. And after that second workshop, I carried on training. I did a training with Amelia and Kincaid, the American animal communicator. I also did a lot of self-development with the animals teaching me. And after a year, I went professional and have been working professionally full-time ever since for 15 years. So that's how I discovered animal communication. And I've been on this, you know, learning curve like this ever since. And it's the most fantastic thing ever in my life.
Fantastic, fantastic. So it was really a capacity on your part to just attune, like initially with that picture of the rabbit. You were just sort of attuned and in some ways you kind of emptied yourself of thought and allowed the formation of images and colors and sort of sensations to emerge in your own inner psyche as you were in a state of resonance with the animal. That be a fair description of what of the sort of the faculty that began to develop?
I would like to say yes, but I think I was so skeptical on that first day that actually it was more to do with this particular rabbit making a connection with me. I think I was very lucky. Well, I say lucky. I also think that the rabbit knew what I was meant to be doing, because animals have incredible awarenesses about who we are, why we're here, what struggles we have, how they can help us, how they can heal us and support us in our evolution. And I think that rabbit did me a great, you know, gave me a great gift that day, because it was the awakening point for me. After that, Jim, I had to work really hard at it. So after that, yes, I agree. You know, I've had to do what everybody has to do, which is learn to get quieter and stiller in myself, to really drop down deep into my heart and into trust in this heart-to-heart connection with another sentient being, and learn like everybody else has to learn.
And have you noted in your 15 years, because I imagine you've communicated now with a number of animals. I think we'd all love to hear, is there a difference in communicating with a dolphin as opposed to a rabbit, a bear as opposed to a dog? We humans have different cultures. We're all human, but there's an Asian culture and a Latin American culture and a North American, European culture. And so we have a lot of differences. We speak different languages, and yet we're all human. What's your experience as you've communicated with different species? Do you have to kind of get into a different mindset, or is it basically the same? Tell us about your general experience with the diversity of sentient beings with whom you've communicated.
Well, the truth is that we all speak the same language, because that's the language of energy. And every sentient being, whether they are a dog or a bear or a dolphin, is able to communicate in exactly the same way using this transmission of energy impressions. So if I was to go compare one species against another, I would be generalizing so much that I would do them a disservice, because every being within a species is such an individual. What I have found, what I could say on a general level, is that sometimes cats make me work at it. I have to do quite a lot of honoring of cats for them to go, oh, okay, you're all right. I'm going to communicate
Cats
with
are like
you.
that. Cats are like that.
Whereas dogs generally are more eager to please. But again, it depends on who that individual dog is, because some are so deeply wise and like little Yodas, essentially, that it's very different communicating with that individual to an animal, to this, to his dog, who maybe they're on their first incarnation and they're really all about the food and the play and the fun and just being really enjoying their physical presence on the planet. So it's the worst thing to do is to generalize. It would be like saying that all human beings are exactly the same.
Yeah. So you have to adapt. And I know exactly what you mean about cats. We have a cat called Minu, and she's very, very specific and very opinionated about when she wants to be petted and when she does not. But with a remarkable clairvoyance, when Claire even thinks about taking her to the vet, for example, Mina will go and hide. And it's just the thought that the cats, and I think all animals, they're completely clairvoyant in ways that humans are naturally, but we've lost somehow that capacity.
Well, they don't switch off, Jim. That's the thing. They don't switch off from their connection as part of nature like we do as a species. We're probably the only species that switches off, that disconnects from the truth that we are constantly connected with each other. My cat too, the same thing. I would never say Texas was clairvoyant. I would just say that he was communicating. He would know when I was coming home, and he would be out the front of the house, in the road, a bit scary, in the road to greet me home. He was thrilled that I would be home. So I'd have to, my partner and I, stop the car. One of us would have to get out, pick him up, which he loved, and then the other person could then park the car safely. But, you know, Rupert Sheldrake's written a whole book about
Yeah,
this dogs that know when their owners are coming home, about JT that always knew when his guardian was coming back as well.
yeah, yeah. We had Rupert on just a couple days ago, and he was
Oh,
telling us various stories of his studies, where they've done studies with masses of people on dogs and cats that know when their masters are coming home. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Now, one question that's come up from one of the participants, Jane, is asking, how do you discriminate between animal communication versus just your imagination?
yeah, whether you're making it up or not. This is the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing if your pathway, so the way that you receive communication the most is thought forms, which is mine. That's the hardest one to discern the difference. But if you're someone that receives the images or the emotions or the physical sensations as transmissions from an animal, if that's how you translate that into information that you can comprehend, it's much easier because, 1 minute you're there still holding this intention of unconditional love for this being that you wish to connect with, and then you feel an emotion that's different to that, then you know that this is the animal. And the same with, you can be asking an animal, how are you feeling? Have you got any health concerns? And then suddenly, your right shoulder is agonizing with pain, and it wasn't the moment before that. So those are quite clear, changes for you to go, that's external, that's coming from external. The thought forms, it's really about resonance. It's all about resonance at the end of the day, because these are vibrations that we are perceiving. And that comes with practice. So with practice, the more you practice communicating with different animals that you don't know and getting that verification, you start to learn that it feels like this for me, and this is very personal for each person. It feels like this for me when I'm correct. And it feels like that when my brain is just filling in the gap, because the brain is so helpful. It wants to fill in the gap all the time. So I have a method now that if I put a question mark, then I'm pretty certain that that was just the brain feeding that in for me. Everything needs to flow for me. And it really helps, if you're feeling it physically, feeling it emotionally, or you're sensing the thought forms coming to you with lots of attitude or lots of softness or just different to yourself, they feel like they're coming from out there and traveling in, then you can discern then the difference between that's me making it up and that's actually an animal giving me that information.
Yeah, gotcha. That's a process of real inner discernment. And it's
Yeah.
because it's a nuance between the inside out and the outside in. That's
Yes.
a profound way to put it. And so, what I would love, P, since there's thousands of people watching this program today, why don't you just walk us through what do you say to people who are kind of new to this domain? They love animals, they want to communicate. What would be some of your foundational principles, or just kind of walk us through how you would kind of teach people how to do this? Because I think everybody would love to leave this session with some kind of capacity that they didn't have before as they interact with their pets just around the house. It would be a wonderful thing.
Yes, okay. Well, I think the first thing to understand is that this is not a gift. This is innate. We are all born with this ability. So everybody tuning in right now, you can all communicate with animals, and you might be communicating with them already, but you haven't recognized it in a really conscious way. And for example, you just have a gut feeling about how your cat or your dog or your horse or your rabbit or whichever species is feeling, or whether they want this or whether they don't want that, beyond the physical cues that they give to us, and beyond those verbal cues that they give, when you just have this gut knowing that maybe something's wrong, maybe they need this, maybe they need that. So most humans that love animals are already communicating. And then we're trying to make it a bit more conscious, so that we can ask questions like, are you lonely? Would you like a companion? And in which case, what kind of companion would you like? Would you like the same species? Would you like a different species, male or female, younger or older? And then you can get down to nitty-gritty detail. And so I think it helps right at the beginning to have that shift of consciousness where you go, this is already part of me. I am part of the animal kingdom, that I am, and just a species with all the species. We are to recognize that we're not at the top of this pyramid, that actually it's like this, it's a circle and we're all equals. And so when we transcend in a way that disconnect of it's them and it's us, it makes it easier just to be in that space that's needed to share with another animal. And a really great way, I'd be really happy just to share a method with people that that you can all go and practice with any species, including the birds outside. So if you don't have an animal in your life right now, that's absolutely fine. Or if you want to communicate with an animal that's passed over, you can also do that. And it's about, to start with, it's about really bringing yourself present. So I would find the best time of the day for you where you're not rushing around, where you can really, section out some of your time to be present and still. So sit down, focus on your breathing, really focusing on your breathing. So notice every breath that comes in and every breath that goes out. And as you're breathing with every out breath, I encourage you to really relax your body. So as you're breathing in, notice where you're holding yourself or whether there's tension in any places. And breathe into those areas and then really relax them with your out breath. And I would say do that for as long as you need, depending on what you've been doing before. Whether that's 30 seconds, 10 minutes or half an hour, however long you need to really relax your body and bring yourself present. So every time you find your mind wandering, just go, I need to focus on my breath. So you're bringing yourself into the present moment. And then you shift your awareness from that breathing space down into the heart center. And sometimes it's helpful to actually put your hand over your heart to have that physical connection. And then imagine that you're dropping down into that heart space and then really relax in that heart space and remind yourself of how much you love your animals or a particular animal that you want to communicate with. Because that really creates that frequency of love that just generates that really strongly. And then I ask you to share the love from your heart with the animal. So don't worry about, precise location, especially not if they're in spirit. It's just an intention. You're having this intention of sharing love, unconditional love from you to the animal. And trust that that reaches them, that connects with their space wherever they are. And I always like to say, I love you. I love you. And if this is one of your animals, use their name. And then I also like to say, I would like to communicate with you. And of course, with your own animals, you don't have to, introduce yourself. If it's an animal you've never met before, I'd probably say, hi, my name is P. I would like to communicate with you.
Just like you do
Because
with people.
yeah, because manners really matter. They really matter. They matter with animals, they matter with trees. It's just really good to be polite and open-hearted, because then you can enter into a much better, exchange with another being. And then I would wait, hold the space, see if they share anything immediately. And if they don't, ask them a question and keep it really light, keep it open. So one I like to start with is, how's your day going? What have you been doing? How are you feeling? Because most animals are so like, oh, wow, they're actually asking me how I am and, what I'm feeling about my day. That they like to communicate, and then you might receive their response, through the thought form that you're most likely going to hear with your own inner voice, through emotions, which you'll feel inside, physical sensations that you'll also resonate within your own body, or sometimes people get drawn to the area of an animal's body. So if they're in the physical form and in front of you, you might get drawn in. The other thing that can happen is you can have the image of them with your third eye in front of you and just get drawn into an area of their body as they're answering something. And smells and tastes, of course. And I would really keep it light. When you're starting out communicating with animals, it's very easy to put yourself under a lot of pressure or have very high expectations. I would say keep it light, ask positive questions that are interesting for the animal. And then when you finish communicating with them, and don't have the intention of making it really long at the beginning. I would just, work up to length of time. It can be really short at the beginning because you just need this tiny little window of opportunity to create that first conscious exchange with another being. And at the end, thank them. So let's, go back to manners. Thank you for communicating with me. And you can do that verbally, or you can just do that silently in your mind. And that really encourages them to communicate with you a second time and a third time and a fourth time, because they've had a great experience.
So in some ways, I love this notion, P, that manners matter.
Mm-hmm.
And it matters how you approach, your significant other in the morning. It matters for me how I come on to Humanity Rising every day. Manners matter. And what I'm sensing from you is that communicating with other animals is not all that different than an honorable way to treat the animal called human beings. But you do it not through a written or verbal language as much as a sensation of appreciation and openness, and with the intention to begin to communicate. I think that's probably at the heart of it, is at the heart of the heart is the intention to resonate and communicate with their heart.
Yeah, exactly. And I would really say that animals have taught me to be a better human, because since communicating with them, I am much more generous towards human beings. I am much more understanding of human beings. I'm much more forgiving if they say something to me sharply, because I now take a moment to go, they could be having a really bad day. There could be things going on in their life that I don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have that same connection with human beings until I started to communicate with animals. And they've really reminded me, that forgiveness is so important, that kindness is so important, and just having an appreciation of another being and who they are is really vital.
Yeah. Well, listen, a number of questions are coming up. One from Alicia Kane. And she says, I've always loved animals and was so connected to them, but I have experienced trauma with pets leaving me, either while growing up when my mother gave away many of the pets, after I was very attached to them, and I suffered so much at that time. Then when I became a mother myself, I had pets for my sons, but they would die for various reasons. Some were because I was neglectful, and I just can't get past this. I so want to connect to animals again. I miss them, and I'm so sorry. I imagine a lot of people have experienced cruelty to animals. When you travel around the world, you see people behaving in almost unspeakable ways with animals. And I think there's a lot of sorrow, a lot of grief. We eat animals. So what would you say to Alicia?
I would say, Alicia, in fact, I'm going to let Morgan answer this question, who is the dog that introduced me to animal communication, who's passed over many years ago. Death has a purpose. Learn to embrace change. Ease suffering where you can. Learn to love your heart. Find peace in the knowing you did what you could at that time. We all love you. There is nothing to fear. Death is a process. It's the suffering we wish to end. That's Morgan communicating that to you. In fact, let me just show you Morgan so that you know who communicated. There.
Now, you've mentioned, P, a number of times, communicating with animals physically present, but also animals who have passed on. Speak a little bit more about that. That's a fascinating notion. I mean, deep in human culture, particularly in Asia and the Chinese culture, is the notion of the communication with the ancestors. In indigenous cultures around the world, they regularly communicate with the ancestors. How did you discover this capacity? Was it when Morgan died that you just realized that you didn't stop communicating with him? I mean, how did that happen? And what's the difference between physically present and those who have passed kinds of communications?
I used to be an atheist. I grew up, and my family didn't decided I could decide myself whether I believed in anything like religious or godlike or afterlife. And I was terrified of death because I had the belief that, when you died, that was it, the end, black hole, nothingness. And I used to cry over it, I couldn't bear it when people talked about death around me. And then what Morgan's managed to do for me, and also others, because together we wrote a book all about death and dying in the afterlife, called The Animal Communicator's Guide Through Life, Loss and Love. That's my second book. It's here. Go, that one. Oh.
Beautiful.
That's Morgan and me, different time.
Beautiful dog.
Oh, he's a stunning dog. And with Morgan, as he was getting older and dying, he asked me to start to write about it, about my experience of it, and about his experience of it. And during that process, what I realized is that his experience of it was very different from the one I was projecting onto him. He had a lump on his back that often would bleed. And there was one day when he'd obviously knocked it. He was very frail at this point, and he'd sort of managed to wobble out follow me out into the front garden, and he'd knocked it and then fallen down. And there was blood everywhere, you know, all over the black and white tessellated floor, which Texas had then walked in, and so there were now red paw prints all over the black and white floor. And initially my response was just to sort of crumble and be upset about it. And then he gave me this look, and it's like, really, P, you're still at this point? You know, I'm trying to teach you. And then I started laughing because he wasn't bothered at all. He just wasn't bothered. I just had to stop the bleed and do the practical thing. And Texas was like, yeah, you know, this is how it is. And there was another day, I managed to position him in front of his food bowl, and he was eating, and I'd left him for a second to literally go just a couple of feet away to do something, and came back, and he'd fallen on his side up against the skirting board, and his face was in his bowl. He was trying to push himself up by pushing his face into his bowl, and he couldn't because he was so frail. And I picked him up and I got him round and I put him in the front of his bowl again, and he just carried on eating straight away. I collapsed on the floor behind him and crying because this is, you know, I just don't want to see him like this. You know, I adore this dog. And he stops for a moment and he looks at me. And I just remember hearing, like, with the Catherine Tate voice, do I look bothered? You know, am I bothered? And then, of course, I was like, no, you're not, are you? You're really not bothered. And everything changed from that point where I was like, this is just about palliative care. You know, this is practical. He doesn't need me to be in a sobbing mess and fight, you know, just being emotional all over the place. I just have to be practical for him and just continue loving him as he approaches the end of his life. And so he was able to say what he needed and when he needed it. And after he transitioned, he came to me and he was like, sit down. So I sat down, and within 30 minutes, he told me that we were going to write this book together, and he gave me the names, the chapters, and everything we were going to write about. And he said it's going to be a supportive guide for people facing the loss of their animal, you know, through transition or through a very difficult, traumatic way, and then connecting with them the other side. And it's going to have the animals' points of view in it, as well as the humans. And he's taught me about the afterlife through this experience, but also through my clients, because, you know, actually one of my favorite roles as an animal communicator is to communicate with people's animals who've passed over, to be able to bring them messages that really relate to them, you know, and to have that connection of healing, because people sometimes hang on to a lot of grief and a lot of self-blame, you know, which actually the animal doesn't attribute to them at all. And so having this opportunity for the human being and their animal to then connect again is a great honor for me. And I would say, I remember the other part of your question was the difference between communicating with an animal in the physical body and the one that's transitioned is that the animals that have transitioned feel light. There's a lightness to them. There's a feel of expansion. And there's no feeling of needing anything earthly, you know, like food or running or anything like that, you know, sleeping in their favorite place. It's a beautiful, beautiful experience being in spirit, being able to communicate with an animal in spirit. It's always joyful, you know. It's like you're blissing out with them in this incredible expansive consciousness of love, which is probably why I really like that part of my job.
Well, you know, this raises a question that Larry Cashin has posed about, have you ever talked to animals about God? I mean, we humans think that we're the ones that think the big thoughts. And the animals, if they're conscious at all, are only conscious of the immediate present, and they don't kind of appreciate the sunset, or they don't think philosophically or intellectually in any way. That's what we humans do. But what I'm gathering from you, I mean, what would you say? Have you talked to Morgan or other animals about God? Do they have a sense of the cosmic totality in which we all find ourselves?
I mean, we're coming down to individuals again, but individual animals have a much, much greater knowledge of the universe and evolution and planetary systems than most human beings on the planet, honestly. I'm going to let Texas answer this one for you, because he's more in that sort of God space. Morgan's the humble one, Texas not so humble.
Well, to even conceive of God takes a certain hubris.
So his answer to the question is that God is within each one of us. God is unconditional love. We are all connected as part of God.
Wow. Wow.
And he's like, it's really very simple.
I just want to pause there, everyone. Take in what Texas just said. All sentient being around us understands and has the capacity to understand the cosmic totality, the divine pleroma, at the same depth of humans. I mean, if we just take in that awareness today, that's a Copernican revolution in humanity's relationship to all other species. They're in the same cosmos. And, you know, what you just channeled is what a mystic would say. It's what Jesus said. It's what Buddha said. I mean, so well done.
It's what Texas says. There you go, everybody. That's
well done. Thank you, Texas. You know, and that raises, P, another question about that's come up a couple of times. Gareth Manning is saying, you know, what do different animals think about humans actually eating animals? Danish is pointing out that there's statistics that we kill 7 billion chickens a month on planet Earth right now, in part thinking that they don't have any cognitive, emotional, psychological capacities. But it's really, we're killing, every time we kill an animal, we're killing somebody just like ourselves, but in a different form.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, what do animals think about our incessant killing of animals?
Let me start with chickens, because I just love talking with chickens. Chickens are, you know, hens are the most beautiful beings. They're also really opinionated, you know, they have a lot to say, so they're great for beginners, hens and chickens. So you know, the way they talk about their eggs, for example, is that they are gifts of God. And what I've learned from them is that they don't mind sharing some of their eggs with humans if they're treasured, if they're honored, and as long as humans don't take too much. What they really like is they like a dirt bath, they like shade, they like sun, they like freedom. They like to be able to live their hen lives naturally in small groups, you know. What I understand from animals, because this question comes up a lot, is that no being likes suffering.
Mm.
No sentient being would put their hand up and go, yeah, you know, okay, I'll go do that. So in every case, suffering is to be avoided. Suffering is to be eased. Suffering is to be stopped.
Mm. Yeah.
They are just like us. We are just like them.
Yes.
We are all together. We are all, the same energy with different coats on. We're all sentient beings. And so really what we do to another sentient being, let's call them a cow, let's call them a whale, let's call them a bee. What we do to them is what we do to ourselves, because we are all interconnected. There is no separation between us and any other sentient being on planet Earth.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there's another question that's related to this are you picking up anything in particular from the whales and the dolphins these days? We're all mindful of the desecration that's going on in our oceans by the big fishing trawlers that are just literally clear cutting the ocean floor and decimating the fish of the sea. And we've probably, many of us have seen The Cove, a documentary on how the Japanese government and industry are capturing dolphins and butchering dolphins for food in the Japanese market. So that's a related question, not only about what animals are communicating about killing other animals, but animals that are now endangered and threatened in species. And that raises just a cluster of questions, whether there's a difference between what you're picking up or communicating with wild animals as opposed to pets. But speak to us about what the different species are communicating about sort of the planetary environment. Is that part of the conversation, or is it just more personal?
The conversation is always about unity consciousness. So whether it's a dog in your life, whether it is, a rat out in the woods, or whether it is a whale in the ocean, the conversation is always the same, that we evolve together or we don't evolve. So it's really vitally important that humanity wakes up. And by waking up, for me personally, that means understanding the importance of our interconnected relationships, and that if we keep on harming other beings through our actions or through our consumerism, we are heading towards an extinction, which at the moment, from how I see it, unless we change, humanity will not, come out the other side of. So this is a really crucial moment for us to understand and to integrate into our lives, our interrelated relationships with all of life, to understand that we are nature, to really understand what that means, so that when we exploit whatever area of the planet and whatever species on the planet, we are also exploiting ourselves. And that only goes one way. And it's not to flourish, it's not to thrive, it's the opposite of that. So what's incredible about animals is that they don't do the shame and blame that we do as a species. They are all about love, forgiveness, and see animals with such huge open hearts. That's how they view us, with their huge open hearts, that they just hope that we will come to understand what's really going on. To recognize the sacredness of a petal on a flower, to recognize the importance of a tree and just moving through the breeze and just having these moments of connection with all of nature, so that we fall back in love with nature, so that we fall back in love with ourselves. And when we are in love with ourselves, and this is a message actually from the whales, Jim, that I've just remembered. You know, what's your message for humanity? I asked them, and they said, we want you to know who you are.
Mm.
I want you to know who you are.
Mm.
And once we do recognize who we are, that paradigm shift, that shift of consciousness changes how we live on the planet and the choices that we make on that individual level.
Yes. Well, I mean, to that point that you just made, Stanley Pokras just put in the chat, it would seem to me that animals like whales have memories that are passed from generation to generation. And it would be interesting to try to learn how whales see humanity in their oral histories. And that's another thing. I mean, these, not only do the species talk, but they have oral histories. And that would be a fascinating, when we get more sophisticated in understanding the other languages, I'm sure that the whale song that we hear and we think is just music, I'm sure they're communicating something very profound. They probably have their own myths and legends that they pass from generation to generation. Have you ever picked up anything like that?
So I have been in the ocean with whales singing, with humpbacks singing, a number of times, and just feeling that going through, all of my body and my chakras. And from my personal point of view, they are toning. They are not only communicating with each other, and they're not only communicating with whales of spirit in the ocean, but they are also toning with Gaia. And I feel like whales are doing the most important work for consciousness of the planet, that they are so vital to us being able to stay alive. And that it's so important that the ocean and ocean life is allowed to thrive for Gaia, for the planet. It goes much deeper than, understanding what is the whales singing, what are they saying to each other. For me,
Exactly.
there is much more spiritual communication going on than this.
Yes, exactly. It reminds me of the Oracle of Delphi in ancient Greece. People would go to the Oracle from all over the Mediterranean world because they didn't know and they wanted an answer. And they would come to the temple of Delphi to commune with the old crone, an old sage woman, and ask their questions. And there was a plaque as you entered into the temple, and it just said simply what the whales are saying: know thyself.
Know thyself, exactly. Know thyself. In fact, that could have been the words that they used. It was when I was holding a dolphin and whale retreat out in Hawaii that I asked them. That was a couple of years ago. And the dolphins, of course, they're doing really important work too. One is to really help people transform through joy, through play, but also, that frequency that they're putting into the ocean all the time and moving about is really important. And they're incredible time travelers. They are multiverse experts. So there's an awful lot we can learn from other species if we just open our mind a little and open our hearts and step into a place of reverence where we can connect with them.
Well, one thinks of or just remembering the tsunami in Sri Lanka back in 2004, where the elephants and the various animals knew it was coming. And I happen to be in California at the moment, and there's all kinds of stories that before a big earthquake, the cats in particular will get all agitated. So this assertion that you're making about the capacity of the whales and other species, the dolphins, to commune with the totality. They have a clairvoyance that alerts them to future events before they happen. There's a lot of research, as you know, on animals' capacity to sense the future before it occurs.
Yeah, exactly. And they're picking up on lots of different things. But they're definitely telepathically communicating all the time. I was just thinking, actually, I have an example that I can share with you about whales and dolphins. I was on a boat in Hawaii, and we were trying to find the dolphins. There were 34 of us on this catamaran, and we weren't finding them, and we weren't finding them. And then we saw a humpback whale. And so I asked the whale, just quietly on my own, minding my own business on the side of the boat, where are the dolphins? Where are the dolphins? We're trying to find the dolphins. And the whale pictured to me, well, they're all the way up that, we were traveling this way. They're all the way up there, and they're really far. They're high up. I said, are they? Okay, thank you. Stayed quiet. And then we had this moment where the captain said, well, what do you want to do? Want to keep going in this direction, or? And they put it to a vote on the whole boat of 34 people, and the vote was even. So it's like, oh right, okay, what should we do? And I'd actually told a friend on the boat that I'd had that communication with the whale, who then went and told one of the safety guys who was organizing this. And she came over and said, P, would you mind if we told everybody what the whale said to you? And I said, no, that's fine. We're on Joan Ocean's boat. These people are very open-minded. This is going to be fine. So yeah, sure, tell them. And so she did, and they voted again, and they voted to do what the whale said. So we all decided, we had one shot at this, basically. We can go that way once, or, maybe see the dolphins, maybe not, or we can do this. And everybody said, well, let's just go, let's do what the whale said, then let's go that way. And we were traveling for ages, absolutely ages. It had been like half an hour. And I was starting to go, oh, crikey, what if I'm wrong on this? This is not going to look good. And I was starting to worry. And then just as I was worrying, this whale, different whale, just breached right next to the boat. I mean, really close. And the safety guide and I said, that's encouragement. Let's keep going. Yeah. Because this is the kind of thing that they do. So we kept going, and we went much further than the captain would normally go on this catamaran. He'd been working there for decades and never gone this far. But we both felt we have to keep going. So we get to the spot where the whale said, yep, that's where they are. And we stopped the boat, and we're looking, standing on the back of the boat, looking out, and there's nothing, absolutely nothing. So I open my heart and I tune in to the ocean. And my safety guide does the same. He's very telepathic. And we are tuning in and we're going, are you down there? Are you here? And visually, I see loads of them deep at the bottom. And I said to her, so what have you got? She said, oh yeah, they're here. And I said, yeah, I get that too. So then we have to wait 5 minutes, and then they come up and they welcome us in with so much joy and affection. And so everybody gets in, respectfully snorkeling with them. And as they're getting off after this experience, over and over and over again, they're saying that is the best dolphin encounter I have ever had in my life. And, a lot of these people had been swimming with dolphins for years. And my feeling was it was to do with the level of trust that the human being species put in the communication from the whale to the dolphins. The dolphins went, okay, we're hanging out. We're going to wait for the humans to come here. And then if they do, we're going to have a great time with them. It's just so much joy. And the next thing, just one more part of this story, we're going out again the next morning, and we come out the harbour, and this has never happened in Kona before. There are 3 humpbacks waiting for our boat, and they breach and they breach and they breach and they breach, the 3 of them, over and over again for about 15 minutes. And initially the boats are going like, yeah, wow, this is incredible. And over time, we all moved really naturally into absolute silence and reverence and tears streaming down our faces, you know, because this was the whales coming to us and saying to us, and I received it telepathically too, you know, we're all connected. Basically, that's the message. You know, we're here to give you this physical expression to let you know you heard us, you trusted us, we are all connected, we can communicate all the time. And it was just beautiful, you know, and those are the kind of experiences I have in my life now.
That's beautiful. P, what a beautiful story. And it's profoundly moving. It's profoundly moving. Well, listen, as we bring this session to a close now, tell us about your Conversations with Nature World Summit that you're having around Earth Day in about a week's time, because we want to support it. I think it's up on our Ubiverse, everyone. But P, just take a few minutes and tell us what you're doing with this summit and who's coming, and maybe put the link in the chat box, and so we can celebrate it and encourage people to participate.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to explain to you why I'm doing the summit. So last year when we went into lockdown here, I asked the animal kingdom, how can I best be of service to you? And they asked me to create the Global Transformation series that I created last year, which was the different species communicating each week over 8 weeks. At the end of that, the human beings that were part of that process said, well, we don't want this to end. You know, this is the best thing that's ever come out of COVID. So I said, well, that's great. But, you know, I also have to pay my mortgage and my bills. So they said, that's fine. So I created the Pride membership subscription, which everyone can join if they would like to, which is monthly sessions with different species. And then at the end of the year last year, I put the question out to the animal kingdom again, you know, what would you like me to do if you know? How can I best be of service to you? And they said, we want to do some bridging, and we want it to be huge, and we want you to create this big accessible event for human beings. I went, okay, so what are the subjects? And they said animal communication, animal conservation, and compassion. And the mission of it is to help co-create a healing relationship with the natural world. And I said, okay, how big? And they were like, as big as you dare. So I've gone as big as I dare for my first summit, Jim, and I've created this. It's a 4-day event. And if I can just share my screen, would that be all right?
Please do.
Let me just get rid of this. Okay, everybody, let me just see if I can. Okay. So I've created this event, and it starts next Tuesday on the 20th, and it's absolutely free to register. So it's Conversations with Nature World Summit. And all of these species that you can see in this image are part of the summit. And I chose the Nautilus as the logo because of the golden ratio, which, yeah, you know that, and a lot of people will know about that. So there's 2 parts to the summit, and the 20th to 23rd is a completely free ticket. You just have to register. Then I'll send you the links to all the speakers' lessons and conversations. And then the interactive part of the summit is the following week, And that you can, if you just upgrade to the All Access Pass, you can have interactions with all of the speakers. So over 4 days, we're having sacred ceremony round of fire where we're entering into deep discussion, and they will be answering your questions. So I very much encourage you to come to that. And also by upgrading, I'm giving you 6 months free membership of the Pride, which I mentioned earlier. And you get all of the replays of all the summit speakers. And I'll just, what shall I do first? I'm just going to tell you about Nature is Speaking, because that came to me in the middle of the night. I was woken up by the animals, and I heard those words in my mind, and I knew that they were being communicated to me, so I needed to write them down. So I wrote them down, and then I went back to sleep. And they said, this is really important. This is what we want at the top. This is why you're doing it for us. And that is that nature is speaking to us all of the time. What would happen if we listened? How would that change us? How would that change our relationship with the natural world? And what would that change look like? So this event is really about giving a space for species and the natural world to be able to speak to humanity. And I'll just show you this.
We're only a small blade of grass in the vastness of Mother Earth. And the grass has been disturbed, and we have to bring something back.
That there's just an incredible wisdom. That there is something in these beings, some sort of inherent wisdom.
Remembering our connection, and remembering our connection to all, remembering our interconnectedness to the web of life.
This is our moment of choice. I choose life, I choose hope, and I choose hope in action.
We can reinsert ourselves in that cycle of life in a way that makes a positive difference. We become part of the solution, not the problem.
We don't end at our fingertips, and that separation is an illusion.
Sorry, stop that. So we have the most incredible speakers. I've intentionally made it all women, not to exclude men at all. You're all very welcome. But there was, very early on in the planning of it, I felt strongly that these messages were coming. It's give the female voice a stronger platform. And so with the divine feminine rising, with our consciousness expanding, with the needing to balance the divine feminine and the divine masculine, I went, okay, we'll do this. We're going to have all female speakers. So I have people ranging from 18 through to 90 from lots of different countries around the world. We have people talking about sharks, snakes, bees, trees, elephants. We have people talking about stars, planets, cosmos, consciousness. We have people talking about humans and nature. We're covering everything. You know, in summits, I'm told that you're meant to niche. We are not niching. We're going global. We're going universal. We're looking at unity and diversity. And you're all very welcome. I do hope that you will register for it and that you will join us. And it begins next Tuesday.
Pea Horsley, this has been profoundly moving. You've taken us very deep into an awareness that has been so lost We're surrounded by pets, by wildlife that are in communication and communion with the larger cosmos in ways the greatest of our mystics can only fathom. And it comes from the dog sitting at our feet, it comes from the whale in the ocean that just hears the humble voice of a woman who's willing to be open to that communication. And I think you're pointing the way of all of us to a deeper resonance with who we really are. Know thyself, says the whale. Know thyself, says the crone of Delphi. And you've helped to illuminate that. And this has been one of the most beautiful sessions of Humanity Rising. And I want to encourage each and every one of you to check in on this Conversations with Nature Global Summit next week, the 20th to the 22nd. And then beyond that, I hope everybody joins the Pride. We at Ubiquity are deeply committed to interspecies communications. We have our own courses on interspecies communication through our Wisdom School. It is a fundamental challenge, and I would just urge every one of you to consider, as a result of this conversation today, whether you should be continuing to eat animals, whether you should be continuing to eat fish, whether this is a time, as Jane Goodall says, for ethical reasons, for reasons that she uncovered on behalf of us all 60 years ago in the jungles of Africa with the chimpanzees, that these animals are alive, they're intelligent, they're empathetic, they're psychologically sophisticated, they're emotionally attuned, just like we are, just differently. And if we could embrace this diversity, what a world we would create just simply out of the awareness. And I want to conclude with something that Pea, you said, and that is that as you've learned to communicate with animals, you've learned more deeply how to communicate with humans. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful note with which to close our sessions, that what Pea has described about communicating with animals is basically how we communicate with each other. And in the end, manners matter. So every time we approach a tree, every time we approach a cat or a dog or a wild animal, bow down in our hearts. Namaste. I welcome, I salute the God within you. That posture is the gateway to the redemption that humanity so desperately seeks during these turbulent times. So, P, thank you. I salute you, and we love you. And as many of us are able, will attend your summit next week. This is a grand adventure you're on.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here with me and all of the animals as well. Much love to you all.
And then tomorrow, everyone, we're going to have a dialogue with Osprey Oriole Lake, another great woman like P is, who's been on the front lines of climate justice, working to empower Indigenous women all over the world who are in the heart of nature, witnessing the desecration of nature around them as we destroy the natural habitat, and the valor of these women, the bravery, the courage, the heartfulness of these women are what we're going to contemplate tomorrow with Osprey Oriole Lake, who's the founder of the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network. That will be tomorrow on Humanity Rising. But Pea Horsley, thank you for today. You've inspired us all. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you again here tomorrow on Humanity Rising, and we wish Pea and all her women all the best in her Conversations with Nature Global Summit. See you tomorrow. Thank you, P.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Lots of love.